Donkey Kong Country is my favorite video game franchise of all time. And, it's always difficult to explain why that is. It doesn't have the accessibility and polish of Mario, the high speed and replayable game design of Sonic, or the intense difficulty of Mega Man. At first glance, I wouldn't blame anyone for not seeing these games as anything more than your standard platformer, but with fancy graphics. But I feel like DKC is one of those things to where you actually have to play it in order to understand it. You truly have to feel Donkey Kong in order to understand what makes it so good. And everything about him, from the environments to the music to the levels, all those things will all click and make sense as soon as you get the chance to experience them firsthand. They're truly some of the greatest games ever made, and while I've dabbled in a few games outside the country branding, I really liked Jungle Beat, I enjoyed Mario vs. Donkey Kong in DK94, and hell, Diddy Kong Racing DS was one of the first games I ever played, and to this day remains one of my top 3 games of all time. But for as much as I love those games, the country games as a series are always gonna be unmatched in my eyes. They have a vibe all their own, an atmosphere all their own, and I cannot wait to explore and share with you the many different things that makes this franchise such a treasure in the gaming landscape. But with all that being said, I feel like the original game on the Super Nintendo needs no real introduction. The lab scientists over at Rare went on to create an experience that not only went on to rival its contemporaries, but looked damn fine while doing it. And in an attempt to blow people away with its cutting-edge graphics, it simultaneously blew me away with its inherent quality after almost 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, nerds and geeks, and all my queer and non-binary peeps, this is Donkey Kong Country. By the time this first game came out in 1994, the Donkey Kong IP was what would now be considered as a dead franchise. What was once a character that single-handedly raised the bar for what video games could be, turned into an obscure relic of the past within just a couple of years. The last game bearing the Donkey Kong branding was released in 1983, and the franchise hadn't seen a new installment in over a decade. In that time, Jumpman, his #1 rival, would end up evolving into something much bigger, and would take the spotlight for nearly 2 console generations straight. And in doing so, he took the platformer genre into places that could have only previously dreamed of, and an entire new era of games completely took over the gaming landscape for a long time. And unfortunately for the Kong, he would be left in the dust by all of his contemporaries. He was old news. No one wanted to play his games. Granted, why would they? Mario was right there, and you didn't need to walk all the way to an arcade and dig into your pocket for quarters in order to play his games. I think that might have been another factor as to why DK faded from the public eye so quickly. The industry, by this point, had completely shifted over to home consoles, and even though people still did go to the arcades for fighting games and the like, next to no one was going over there to play this platform game that has a much better alternative that you could play at your own home. He was just kinda sitting there, collecting dust, rotting, hoping that someone would pick him up and make him feel like an icon again. Which is exactly why seeing Donkey Kong be brought back in this new style was such a big deal. The more I think about it, DKC was probably one of the earliest examples in gaming history of a reboot, taking this beloved character and using that brand recognition to push it in an entirely new direction. And in terms of that, the scientists over at Rare did a spectacular job, and were very clever with how they went about modernizing this beloved icon. See, this Donkey Kong hadn't gotten a whiff of success in ages, and because of that, he grew old, he started to lose weight for some reason, and he became more bitter and, dare I say, cranky. On the contrary, this Donkey Kong, who was previously known for leaping across vines and blowing a plethora of hazards, hit puberty. He gained more hair, he gained more muscles, and before he knew it, he would gain the name of Donkey Kong, passed on from the Donkey Kong of the previous generation. This Donkey Kong was a lot stronger and quicker. He was a lot more courageous and bold, and he would stop at absolutely nothing to get his banana horde back. No joke, that's literally the plot of this first game. A bunch of Kremlings take his bananas and he goes on this deadly journey to get them back. Really says a lot about his core values in life. Now, this new and improved Donkey Kong is capable of a lot more things than his father 13 years prior. He comes standard with your typical run and jump, and the run in particular functions a bit differently with DK doing a roll beforehand. He can still throw barrels, he can still do this banana slamma move that's useful for something, and upon breaking the barrels with the letter DK on them, you'll be greeted by DK's superior cousin, Diddy Kong. He's here to accompany our hero on his journey, and is my favorite video game protagonist of all time. I've always had a very special connection to Diddy, mostly because me and him go way back. As previously mentioned, Diddy Kong Racing DS was one of my earliest gaming experiences ever, and since childhood I've always resonated with Diddy the absolute most. He had such an energetic and fun attitude. He had a very charming design. He was just someone who was so courageous and was someone you always wanted to root for. Admittedly, in this first game, he's more or less just a blank slate. Most of these traits we would see as the series progressed, especially with this game's sequel. But here, he's just kinda there, along for the ride. But it's not like that matters at all, because from a gameplay standpoint, Diddy is better than Donkey in almost every conceivable way. He's faster, he holds barrels like a shield, he's faster, he rolls a much farther distance, and did I mention he's faster? I did? Too bad. He's not the best in every situation though. For as useful as it is to hold a barrel like a shield, the throwing distance is pitiful, and for as quick as he is, his smaller size makes dealing with the larger enemies a much more difficult endeavor. But regardless, he's still extremely fun to play as, and in those sections where he isn't the most ideal, you could switch to Donkey Kong with just a push of a button. And if one Kong ends up getting hit, the game would switch to the other Kong automatically. I personally find this mechanic to be ingenious. There's not really a dedicated health bar in these games, so having the other Kong double as a second hit point, I don't know, it just shows a sense of camaraderie between the Kongs, showing that they always have each other's back. And little details like that are just so cute to me. However, for as great as he is, Diddy isn't the only bit of help DK will be getting. On the world maps, you'll run into some more of the Kongs, all of which grant you the ability to save, the ability to go back to any area on the island, and Cranky here is actually nice enough to give you hints and tips. Only in the first area, but still, very nice of him to do so. However, on his quest, DK will also get the help of a few of the animal buddies that live on certain parts of the island. We of course got Rambi, who can wreck absolutely anything in his path. There's Engard, who functions more or less the same as Rambi, but underwater. Squawks, which for one level can provide light in dark areas. There's Winky, who I don't like that much at all. I mean, he can jump high, but he has a weird hitbox, his animations are weird. I just don't like him. And last and definitely least, Espresso. That's all I put in the script about him. So now all this help is great, but one thing that I've really been underselling is just how fantastic all of this feels, because my god, Donkey Kong Country by far has the best controls I've ever experienced in a platformer. Games like Sonic Adventure or Mario Odyssey were really close to taking that title, but the movement, the physics, and the general twitchiness of the controls is simply flawless. The Kongs are floaty, but they still have weight to each and every one of their jumps. Their movement is absolutely perfect. They move just fast enough. They jump and stay in the air for just the right amount of time, and they turn around at the perfect speed. It feels like whenever I die or lose a Kong in this game, it's almost entirely my fault. But where these controls truly shine is in the very levels that you use them in. So, with the help of Diddy, Cranky, Candy, Funky, and all the animal buddies, DK must now make his way through honestly some of the most well-crafted and satisfying set of levels in the entire series. Everything from the enemies to the obstacles to the hazards are placed in a very particular way, and the way in which they are placed highlights the sheer strengths of DKC's gameplay loop. That sounds very unnecessarily fancy and complicated, but here's what I mean. Let's go back to the roll for a minute, as there's a very important reason as to why you use it before you start to run. Now, obviously whenever you roll, you'll gain a small burst of momentum before you actually start to run. However, if you roll into an enemy, the speed of your roll increases and you move faster. In addition, you can roll off the sides of ledges to gain more distance while jumping. These moves alone always provide some sort of advantage when it comes to maintaining your momentum. Adding on to that, the levels themselves are relatively straightforward, and aside from a few sections that involve the cannon, there's nothing in this game that really halts that sense of speed. Everything you do in this game always circles back to that sense of momentum, and it's only when you take advantage of the straightforward level design and utilize the roll move where Donkey Kong Country becomes a game more about fluidity and rhythm. Skillfully stringing together roll combos, ledge rolling, bouncing off enemies while simultaneously maintaining your speed while doing so is indescribably satisfying, and it's the type of satisfaction that you simply can't get from any other platformer. But these levels do such a good job at keeping this sense of flow alive. There are levels like Stop and Go Station or Loopy Lights where the barrels that you hit change the lighting, and everything is placed in a way to where you can change the color of the lights without ever stopping your momentum. There are also levels like Treetop Town, a level that features a bunch of barrel cannons, but the cannons themselves are placed in a way that makes it entirely possible to blast through those sections with very little waiting. Heck, even the water levels are designed like this. Yes, you are still dealing with water physics, but even still, there is a rhythm to avoid the various undersea hazards. I could honestly pick examples all day long. So many of these levels are designed like this, and they're all fantastic. But don't get twisted, for as straightforward and as tight as these levels are, they can absolutely kick your butt if you're just mindlessly rushing through them. These levels can get pretty hard at times, but I find that aside from a few cases, nothing in this game ever comes off as cheap or just flat out careless. Take Tanked Up Trouble for example, one of my personal favorite stages in the game. It's a stage that has you collect fuel to power this fuel-powered platform, and collecting the fuel in question can be quite hard at certain points. However, the game makes sure that everything you need to collect the fuel is right there, and it never surprises you or starts being flat-out stupid. There's also Slip Slide Ride, a level that features ropes that bring you up and down. Again, traversing through the stage is challenging, but it's also entirely manageable because of how well thought out the gimmick was. But even with levels like these, there are also levels like Minecart Carnage, a level in which Crash, these guys, can, well, crash into you with next to no time for you to properly react. Or how about Poison Pond, where on top of having this annoying green mist that covers the entire screen, you have to deal with the most cheapest enemy placements in the entire game. It's levels like these two where DKC is by far at its absolute worst, because all they really amount to is either trial and error or just tiptoeing through the level, playing it at the most slow and boring pace imaginable, both of which completely destroy any sense of momentum you had going into them. But still, even with all those issues, the level design in this game as a whole is absolutely incredible. And I haven't even mentioned the plethora of secrets and hidden collectibles just begging to be found. Like seriously, with my most recent playthrough, I'm just now realizing how many hidden areas this game truly has, and a select few of them can even skip sections of a level altogether, which again, makes a more experienced player able to blast through the game a lot quicker. Most of these hidden areas take the form of bonus rooms, little bite-sized challenges where you collect bananas, and if I'm being 100% honest, they're pretty boring. A majority of them just aren't interesting, and they generally have very little variety in how you collect the bananas. It just kinda seems like there were one of two things in this game that were undercooked, the second of which being the Kong letters. Upon collecting all four, you get an extra life. That's it. I mean, hey, at least it's something. To someone who is unfamiliar with this series, if you were to ask them what the most distinctive trait of DKC was, they would almost certainly point to the graphics. And for good reason. Now, you don't need me to tell you how technically impressive or how revolutionary these graphics were, probably because I wasn't alive. But the part that I really want to emphasize is just how great most of these things look today. I'm just gonna go ahead and get this out of the way before I get bullied. These character models, no. Day looks fine enough. DK doesn't cut it. Nope, it's not doing it for me. The lankiness, the facial expressions, they just don't look right to me. They never looked right to me. It's weird. Like, as someone who grew up with DKC Returns on the Wii and went on the internet and saw this for the first time, I seriously start to wonder how anybody thought that this game looked good at all. But that younger average Joe wasn't quite looking at the right thing, because although the models themselves look horrendous, the actual environments have aged a lot better. The parallax scrolling, the vibrancy and contrast of the environments, the amount of detail that these areas have, and the visual effects used to really sell that level of atmosphere, it all still looks so good. You can definitely tell that the team really want to bring you into this world in the most natural and effective way possible. And while they certainly succeed in doing that, I feel like the real reason why it works so well was really thanks to the sound and the melodies that these areas have. I can gush about Donkey Kong music for the rest of my life if I really wanted to. The Country series, Diddy Kong Racing, even a few of the spin-offs have some of the best music I've ever heard in my entire life. These soundtracks are so good. The extremely talented composers of this first game are as follows. Robin Beeland, who has been involved in a handful of Donkey Kong games like DK64 and the Game Boy version of this very game. We got Evelyn Novakovic, who would return as the main composer for DKC3, and would generally bring a lot of ambience into the mix. And then we have David Wise, who would be returning as the main composer for DKC2, as well as every other game in the series, and was, is, and will always be my favorite video game composer of all time. I'll definitely go more in depth on each of their composing styles with videos on their respective games, but in this first game, it was a collaborative effort, and all three of these talented composers put their minds together to create one of the most iconic soundtracks in the SNES's library. The thing that I love the most about this soundtrack in particular is just the sheer amount of variety. These tracks can be bombastic and melodic, really selling that sense of excitement as you blast through these levels. However, they're not afraid to be slow and atmospheric, really speaking to you with their sounds and drawing you into their world. And in my opinion, this soundtrack is at its best when these two themes mesh together, which they do quite a few times. One of my favorite tracks in the entire franchise is Life in the Mines. It's a song that leans more on the ambient side of things, but everything about the melody is dark and desolate, and really emphasizes not just fear, but the fear of getting lost in such a vast place. But on the other side, we have songs like Fear Factory, a song that's definitely very bouncy, but noticeably uptight and tense. You're nearing the end of the adventure, you're in this huge factory, and you're encountering some of the most dangerous obstacles you've ever seen. It's similar to Life of the Mines in the sense that the song also emphasizes fear, but that aura of intensity that's present throughout makes this another one of my favorite songs in the entire series. Well, since we're already mentioning it, the endgame of DKC is alright. It's revealed that the person who sent out all those Kremlings to steal your banana horde was none other than King K. Rool, king of the Kremlings, and is thick beyond belief. But despite how he looks, he's no pushover. He tries to crush you with cannonballs, he throws his crown at you. It's a really fun fight. And you gotta love these fake credits before the second phase. God, if a younger average Joe found out that the battle kept on going after seeing these, he would have completely flipped out. How could you possibly do something like this? So, with the banana horde restored, and this lovely roll call of all the enemies, bosses, and ammo buddies, as well as Cranky bragging that he did this all in less than an hour with only one life, I don't know, ask this guy about it, the original Donkey Kong Country comes to a close. I mean, God, talk about an iconic first entry. This is the first of a whole pentalogy of games, and the fact that this game has held up as good as, and possibly even better than its successors, is truly mind-boggling. Satisfying gameplay, brilliant music, gorgeous environments, perfect controls. Like, it's no wonder why this game was such a massive hit at the time. It's no wonder people are still raving about this game today. This game, in so many aspects, is just so timeless. However, something about this game that I've come to appreciate in recent years is that, when looked from a broader point of view, this game really does feel like the most definitive a platformer could be back then. It plays like Mario with how you bounce off of enemies, collect bananas, find secrets, and use the ammo buddies, which act like a sort of Yoshi equivalent. It has the tightly designed but equally as challenging levels that emphasize sharp and precise platforming like in Mega Man. And the glue holding everything together is that crunchy, satisfying, speedy gameplay that can be found in most Sonic games. In the beginning of the video, I explained that DKC as a series doesn't really have a core hook like any of those franchises, but I picked those three for a reason, because DKC combines elements from classic Mario, classic Sonic, and classic Mega Man, and manages to make it something all its own. It uses the three platforming titans of the third and fourth console generations as its frame of reference, and as a result, we end up with a game that's much more faster than Mario, that's more challenging than Sonic, and that's more accessible than Mega Man. In a sense, and this is the way that I see it, DKC can be seen as a tribute to nearly the entirety of platformers from that era. In a way, it and its sequels can each be viewed as one last hurrah before the industry would enter a whole new dimension. A dimension that these games' graphics very heavily tease. No matter which angle you look at it from, Donkey Kong Country is the perfect platformer. Thank you.